Bitcoin saw some more volatility yesterday, breaking above its 200 hourly EMA, 50 EMA, and of course the 50 SMA. We did see then a move to the downside as we hit this upper area of resistance. We can see that this came in right on this typical range that we would have expected at 44,600 to 44,788. Rejection here being the previous area of support is now the area of resistance, and we saw an immediate rejection back down. We lost the 50 EMA, the 50 SMA, and of course that 200 hourly EMA. Here you can see that we have a death cross looming. We 50 SMA at 43,473 are looking to cross down lower than that of the 200 hourly EMA at 43,424. This death cross on the hourly chart will probably spark a further move to the downside, where we'll be looking at testing the existing lows that we had previously just down here at the 40,523 to 40,937. Once we kind of finish off completing these kind of structures, we'll be in a stronger position for a bounce to the upside, but I suspect it's still not likely to pierce up higher than what we've already seen, and with our potential moves now looking more likely to see further to the downside. We do of course have Elliott wave theory saying that this is just corrective, so we don't have any major trends to the downside to be overly too cautious with, but there is of course this upper trend line that we can see forming here right now as well. We've touched on this a couple of times, up obviously at the highs at around 45,879. We obviously had a tap on it down here at the $45,500, and of course we can see that we got close to it right here, but obviously we didn't quite get there with the heavy resistance on this level. So are we likely to come up and retest this trend line a couple more times and continue to slip on down? Obviously our previous trend here, this one on the slightly larger scale, is acting as a bit of a brief area of support, but we did wick in there a little bit lower. So how we see this after its breakout, is this trend line done? Is it going to act as support? Are we going to turn it back into resistance? All those things are still debatable, but for the most part we need to consider the fact that we are not in an overly strong position on Bitcoin at the moment. Now, with all of that being said, there are some interesting things that are occurring, right? Our stochastic RSI has some room to the upside. Let me show you here. As you can see, we've still got some progression before we reach up to the overbought area. Now, we don't have to go all the way up to the overbought. We can, of course, just go right the way back down again. It's not an indication of kind of price movement, but an indication of the strength in the move. So we have seen a little bit of a rally at the moment after yesterday's move to the downside, and this stochastic RSI is actually quite well positioned, meaning we might actually push up a little bit more. We take that and we couple that with some bullish divergence that we've seen on the RSI indicator here. This is actually showing us with some more potential moves to the upside. Although we have already moved this RSI up a little bit since we had this bullish divergence flag, we can of course still experience maybe a little bit more in terms of price action. So as we come back into the price chart, what are we talking about here? Well, we can see this little bounce to the upside here. We might be able to continue moving up just a little bit more. Now, the next areas of obvious resistance, if I zoom in just a fraction here, is going to come in just where we found support previously. Okay, so right into here, and that is currently where we are. We can find that this previous area of support at the 43,777 to 43,956 is now our resistance. Okay, so getting closures above, actually, if I actually can refine this just a little bit here, if I go ahead and refine this area, I would say that actually the main area of resistance is going to be kind of right here, 43,845 to 43,965. So this is currently where we're not getting any closed positions. Now, if we can get a closed position above this area, that will give us a little bit more hope that maybe we'll test the slightly higher range coming in at 44,430 before we see any further moves to the downside. So we want to be aware that this is not looking overly too strong at the moment with that death cross looming. We might see price just get rejected here, but if we can get a close above this area of resistance, the bulls might be able to push it up a little bit more before we saw that move to the downside. Momentum does support the idea that we continue a move to the upside. Bullish divergence also is an idea that we do see more of a move to the upside than a move to the downside. So, we're looking at this resistance. Can we get a close above it? If we can, great. If not, then we'll probably still be looking at these moves to the downside. Okay, so there's a lot of buying pressure, as you can kind of see right inside this range right here. This is quite broad. It's 42,450 to 43,376. I suspect that that isn't going to last. And obviously we have loads of buying pressure down here as well. So what we find ourselves in is with a higher low coming in here. And of course we have our lower highs. Now, the problem that we have with this is that this particular kind of triangular-based pattern is going to be based on a continuation. We had this move to the downside. We find ourselves coiling up. We're likely to get broken down from here. So to me, this will be a giant three-wave structural point where we see this getting broke into a new lower low. Ultimately, that'll be where we'll then start to see more of a parallel channel starting to form, in my opinion, which we can then start thinking about maybe possibly seeing a little bit more of a push to the upside. So on our 1 hour time frame, yeah, it's not looking overly great. Let's roll this up into our daily time frame, right? Our daily time frame, we did see that move down lower, and it has a new low, I believe. Let me go ahead and no, it doesn't. Okay, so it's a higher low still, so that's still good. We just have to adjust our trend line to suit where that sits. So you can see it's not really parallel anymore. So we do find ourselves in a bit of a situation. This is still bearish here on the daily time frame. Higher highs, higher lows will have a tendency to break on down. I suspect we're going to be stuck in this range a little bit more before we finally do see that breakdown. Ultimately, we're looking at 40,000 to get lost. Once we lose that, we're going to be going down, in my opinion, to this area of consolidation, 35 to 37k. Lose that, then of course we're into the main range, which will be $30,000 to $33,000. That's going to be the key area for me, where I think we're likely to see the biggest moves in the market. So all in all, our daily time frame isn't looking overly great. Let's go ahead and take the stochastics off and throw in the divergence indicators. Again, no divergences have been noted here since the 29th of December. So again, not looking for any kind of major movements from the divergence indicator, but we are seeing, of course, still some volume profiles that are showing us with higher selling volumes than we are seeing with buying volumes. So again, even though we have these higher highs in terms of price action, we can see that they are actually lower in terms of volumes. So again, volume profiles here, although have spiked up most recently, they are still lower than they were back in October, even though we have pushed up into higher prices since then. So these kind of divergences are quite alarming. Now, the stochastic RSI can still move on down to the oversold, but we are looking for this to actually progress up towards the overbought area. So I'm looking for some green in the market on the daily. This is going to allow us then to probably retest some of those existing highs, get our stochastics RSIs up into the overbought area so that we can see deeper corrections, which are due on the weekly time frame, which you can see here. Now, on our weekly time frame, we are still below our 702. We're failing to close below that 702, which is 44,199. Now, on this, we obviously have highlighted this yellow box area. This is the previous area of resistance. This comes in at 45,417 to 48,234. We're talking about this a few weeks ago or last week. Really, every day just seems to merge into one. I have no idea when I spoke about this. Maybe you guys can let me know in the comments below. But we're basically saying that this is likely to be the area of resistance. We possibly could push up towards for 52 if we got through this area of resistance, but 48 was going to be the obvious area, the $48,500 to $48,000, which is this one right here. Obviously, not getting a closed position above the 702 is not strong for Bitcoin. Obviously, if we can get closed above the 702 Fibonacci retracement on the weekly time frame, then we have an ability to move above or move towards the 786, which gets us that $50,000 range. Ultimately, 48k being kind of the key area. Ultimately, I don't see us moving anywhere higher than that. I think ultimately this range is going to be where we find our rejection. If we end up testing it again, then that's where we're likely to see. Other areas of interest, obviously, on the weekly time frame align very much to the daily. So we've got 36, 37. We have a little bit further to the downside at 30 to 32,000. Underneath there, I think it's 24 to 26. Under that, 19.5 to 21,800. Right. So all of these areas are points of interest. I'm not saying that the price has to go to all of these, but we are expecting price to move down towards some of them during the Bitcoin Spot ETF Sell the News event, which is the same as all of these other Sell the News events that happen to coincide coincide with tops. I mean, people just in the comments are quite unbelievable when it comes to the naivety sometimes. But yeah, essentially, these tops happened because of the sell the news event, not because they didn't just happen and then the sell the news event happened afterwards. It isn't quite how it worked. So we've had really good green amounts of movements in the market to the upside for Bitcoin, 196%. We're going to be looking for about a 30% move, in my opinion, getting us back down towards $30,000 minimum. I would have thought that would have been the most logical thing to do based on what you'd normally expect to see on Bitcoin across the time horizon. Now, once we do have this correction to the upside, target range to the upside is going to be basically $98,183 to $173,779. That's going to be where I think we're likely to top out on the bull market. And as you can kind of see, this happens to fall in line with our curved line here. And this curved line is connecting all of the previous tops together through the history of Bitcoin. So again, we can see here that if we are to test that upper trend line, it is testing this yellow box area. This yellow box area is a part of yesterday's video. So if you haven't already checked that out, I will link it in right here, where I do urge you guys to figure out, or go ahead and check out why I think Bitcoin could be heading up to this particular number.